Hi, I'm Deborah Lane, residential architect. I've been working in a lot of different counties, all the way from Sonoma to Oakland to Castro Valley. And it's always been hard to work with counties and cities, but it's gotten ridiculously hard. Recently in Oakland, in planning for a DS1, which used to be over the counter, and you'd make an appointment, you'd have your working drawings, you had met previously with a planner, you'd go in, they'd stamp your drawings, boom, over to the building department. Now it's not like that. And you know, this last
May, what's this? Yeah.
whoever has their can somebody mute, because it's hard to speak above. Anyway, kids, I have them too, they're great, but I had to redesign the whole project 3 or 4 different times, and this was after showing by email a very specific site plan with all, I just sent it so it was very clear, one snapshot with the parameters, the square footage. And I was told, this is good, go ahead. And then I was told, no, you didn't keep 50% of the exterior wall. And then I was told, after I redesigned it, then, well, no, you didn't, your project has too much square footage. I mean, this stuff dribbled in, requiring redesigns each time. And I've also found that I do a lot of, quote, used to be over-the-counter projects, and it varies. Like in Kensington, just to start, you have to go through KMAC, even if you're adding the smallest thing that nobody will ever see. In Berkeley, you can go straight in. County of Sonoma is really hard to get through for anything. It took months to get basically a shed approved. So I'm just curious what other people are doing about this, and what's worked. It does work to go up the food chain, sort of, and I found one of the directors of the planning department, and she didn't really help me, but I think she got things resolved more quickly.
In what city?
So that's my enough of a beginning. So if anybody else wants to talk about this, and maybe we'll get some form once people start sharing.
I can talk.
Okay.
So I've sort of prided myself on being really good at permit processes, and I've written building code, I've written planning code. I'm on a first name basis with all the directors. This is in Oakland. And I am at my wit's end. It's just, as you were saying, for an over-the-counter planning, it's now 8 weeks. Can you guys hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Oh, you can. Okay. I'm not sure I have any solutions other than that you just have to really follow the protocols and really read the websites that describe what you have to do for planning and building. And as I say, I'm kind of at my wit's end. It's making me want to retire.
Well, I wanted to say, I think one of the things that I found that's helpful is to educate our clients and say, it's a whole new world. It was before this, but it's gotten even crazier. And the things, Oakland, once you go to a planner to approve it, after you go through the building department, Then they have to send it back to the planner for another 2 weeks to make sure that the plans you sent are what you
Conform.
first sent. And then after that, they have to go to another person who says, well, what everybody said is correct. So you add like a month on at the end for this. But does anybody, recently I did a project in Berkeley and Kirsten was really helpful to me. She said, you know, they have things that they like to see on your plans. Here they all are. You know, I've gathered them already. You could go to the website and get them too. Things like that are helpful. And to have an idea, like, do you go in person? Do you have to go through KMAC first, as in Kensington? What's the process? Because it varies so widely.
Can I break in?
Yes, please.
I just submitted a conversion of a garage to an accessory dwelling unit in Milpitas. I just sent in the second review submittal this morning. And planning was okay in Milpitas, but their building department is just crazy. This is a one-story building. I'm adding like 160 square feet, and we're converting the garage to habitable space. So part of the braced walls are on existing footings and part are on new footings. And their requirements were just so persnickety. The guy wanted me to calculate the withdrawal capacity of the epoxy bolts. And I looked all over for a formula, and I finally found a schedule for that in the Simpson literature, but I spent hours trying to figure out how to do that. And just this morning, he's rejecting it because my Title 24 consultant does not have a CEA certificate. And I talked to my guy, and he said that's just an organization that's trying to, you know, weasel their way into energy consulting, and it's not required by the state, but apparently it's required by the Milpitas Municipal Code. So we have to battle on that, and it's just they had me rewrite municipal code clauses about future heat pump washers and dryers. They had me put whole passages of the code on my plans. I'm just so frustrated, and I think I sort of have a connection with Milpitas, but I'm at the point not of retiring like Tom, but I'm at the point where I'm just not going to do any more jobs in Milpitas. But others are also equally persnickety. So that's my rant.
I think there's two parts to the problem, and Claudia, I think you really hit on the second part. The first part, I think, is COVID, and so that has disrupted many cities' ability to do things efficiently and collaborate amongst themselves and get things done in a timely manner. But the other thing is I think that the regulations have become too complex and intricate. And I think what we need to do as professionals is make the public more aware of this, because the only way they can be simplified is if the public requests it in numbers. I mean, you look at how long the codes are. I mean, you know, the building code is what, 2,000 pages? The residential code is 900 pages. And every town has its own zoning ordinance. And in Richmond, the zoning ordinance is 900 pages. And it involves too much detail. It's too highly regulated. It's an animal that feeds on its own tail.
Anybody else? Come on, let's participate. This is participatory. Yeah, hi, Barry. Was that Barry raising your hand? Unmute.
I am now unmuted.
Great.
Okay. So my question is to all of you folks, this is not, I'm not going to give you a juicy anecdote, what do you tell the clients? I mean, you can tell them that things are crazy and that things are more complicated, but none of it makes any sense. And we're spending hours and hours doing things that, how do we justify that? Do they like to pay for it as a separate thing, or is there some nice way and comfortable way to deal with a client who comes up against this stuff and has to pay you for it? Anybody want to answer
Well, I
that
know what
question?
I do, but I'd rather have somebody else say.
Well, I'll jump in. I've been, because there's such a huge variation from one city or county to another, and I seem to be working in about 8 or 10 different localities, and they're so different. So I'm always unprepared when I get, you know, a 15-page plan check list of comments. And so I've just been suffering and just putting in the time to fix it. But I wonder if anyone, when they are caught off guard by this, if you ask for additional fees or how you approach this.
I think that's the way you put the question. Do you ask for additional stuff, or do you just swallow it like we all do sometimes?
No.
Seems like you need to do it in advance.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
what
I have been increasing my fee proposals. So, you know, inflation.
Yeah, but it's like, even I had I had 2 jobs, and it was amazing. One was just a 5-foot addition to a living room. And because of the beam that hangs down, when you do that, you need a moment resisting frame when you break the outside wall. I had to think more about that design than redesigning a whole house. And I came up with more hours because I drew perspectives, I raised it, I did this, I did that. They ended up not even doing it. So I find that a different cost in itself is less, but I just say to clients, I'm basically working by the hour because I like to focus on the work and not on this. And I give an estimated maximum, which I explain. I said it depends on the project, and I give that example. And I also say different counties or cities can require so much differently. And so I don't give a fixed fee, but I just can't worry about it. And if, like this person that didn't end up doing my 5-foot addition, I felt guilty charging them, so I subtracted some from it. But I don't know if I should have. I just felt like he's not even going to do it after all of this, and maybe I should have explained it better. But I know, I knew they didn't have a lot of money, so it's really, there's no one answer. But I think you should tell them up front that you don't know you just don't know.
And does anybody use an expediter to handle all this messy stuff that you don't want to deal with? You can't do that. There are too many back and forths and so forth, right? And they probably not even all that useful. I don't know. What's your opinion?
Well, so much of what the plan check comments require is modifications to the drawings and additional information, additional drawings, additional, you know, calculations and everything. So I don't think an expediter could do that. Plus, you know, my jobs are little jobs, so I don't think we have there's not any cushion in there to pay for an expediter.
Yeah.
Kirsten, do you have is that your hand up, or is that a hand in your office?
No, that's the reactions where you raise your hand electronically so that everybody can see it, even if they're not. Anyways, yeah, I just want to, about expediters. I just got somewhere, I read some email from an expediter who was totally exacerbated about not being able to do their expediting job because of how things are working in the cities. I don't remember which specific city he was referring to, but just because that question came up. And then the other thing I wanted to say, I haven't submitted. I did submit a project in Berkeley this year. And also, hey, Carlos, can you mute yourself? Everybody comes in unmuted, just so you know. So if you hadn't noticed, you're probably not muted. What was I going to say? So we did an expedited review for the building permit because the client all of a sudden wanted it really fast. And my experience was okay. I think it really depended on who the plan checker is. I only got one comment, which I don't know, I think that's just luck. And the structural engineer got lots of comments and several iterations, which also I think is just, bad luck. But that process somewhat went according to plan. I did get 5 times I got sent the wrong planning comments to or the wrong planning approval. And I got planning over and over. I got sent something for an ADU, which there was no ADU in my project. And then the planner was like really was like, what is your problem? And I was like, it's not my project. It's not the number of my project. It's not the scope of my project. Just send me my comments. It was really hard. So I don't know what's going on. I think that's going back to COVID, but I had asked some people what their experience was with Berkeley, and I think if you need to be sure about the time, you need to go expedited, unfortunately.
Hi, Matthew. I saw you were unmuted, so I thought I'd ask you to join in. Do you have anything?
Sure. Yeah, Matt Tacker. I'm an architect, but I've also worked inside city government and written zoning. Blame me. And on the private side, I've represented developers and managed entitlements. So, I agree with the comment earlier, which is that I think to get to the core of the issue, the architectural profession needs to lean on public decision makers and beat the drum around simplifying standards with a desire for more objective development standards. Are you guys familiar with that? In other words, to try to take things out of discretionary review process. There's a desire to spell everything out ahead of time, which means that you have to anticipate every conceivable pitfall, which is only going to make things more complicated, especially since firms that are writing these objective development standards are seeing it through the lens of their aesthetic preferences, let's say, rather than through the lens of how do you expedite the review process. So as these objective development standards initiatives are being advanced in each locale, it'd be great if somebody from AIA would show up at a meeting and articulate that, or maybe there's a letter that the chapter could draft that could be sent to each community as when zoning updates are occurring. So I think advocacy is going to be really central, and I believe in my own experiences that again, I value simplicity and elegance, and in the zoning that I write, but I don't feel like that is a shared bias within the planning profession. The other part of it is that the expediters that have been talked about so far are people on the city side, which means that they're representing the city's interests. And to make it perfectly clear from the city's perspective, if you're the staff person on the city side, you are trying to cover your ass. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that the staff people feel justified in taking their time and being thorough, and they're more afraid of getting yelled at in a community meeting because somebody in the community discovered that they had interpreted something incorrectly. They're more afraid of that than they are of the architect getting frustrated. So I do think that there's a role out there, and I've served as this role before, but I'm not doing it presently. There need to be expediters who are on the private side. People who are perhaps just out of government, have actually, within a jurisdiction, say Berkeley, have just left the city, are familiar with the approval process, are familiar with the development code, and actually can offer insight as to how that code is going to be interpreted given the project that's being proposed, and seek that counsel as a consulting service on the private side in support of our clients. I don't think you're going to get that same care or level of service if we're just waiting for the expediter on the city's side to provide it.
The issue is that it's just, I was trying to organize a group of architects to go against Oakland, because not only are there issues with the code, but the planner that made me redo the plans is uneducated regarding Oakland code. They did not train her correctly. And I heard from Linda Randolph that they fired all these people and they're not even training their people. And, also there is this whole ridiculous thing that happens where in Fremont, this older guy red marked my plans when I was there, changed everything for me, and we were off to go build. And now the younger people have gotten very persnicketous. They don't really even understand the ramifications or what they're doing. It's a big issue. And I finally told this woman who kept changing everything, or I said, I'm going to get fired because it looks like I don't know what I'm doing. And only then, I found this very useful. Only then did she really make an attempt to try to help me. But before that, she really didn't care. She was like, oh. She said, well, they'll understand. I said, no, they won't. I'm supposed to be able to get that. And regardless of why this isn't working, it's sour grapes. This is a repeat client. And I find that effective. But I have yet to get people to help go against the city of Oakland because of how poorly their planning staff understands their code, which is a third issue. But
I want to kind of second some of the things that Matt said, but I also just want to share a little anecdotal experience. I think on just about every job I do these days, I don't know, I have 9 going on now. Somebody in planning or building, it's not just Oakland, it can be any city. Somebody in planning or building gets a regulation incorrect, and I have to spend time and go back to the source, the municipal code or whatever it is, and show them, that they're not correct. And they don't have an easy job. I mean, these codes are very complicated. And maybe the point that you're making, Deborah, about COVID and changing the profile of the experience level of the planners or the building inspectors or the plan checkers or something is a factor. But still, this is an impediment too. And I find that, I can point out what's not correct and I can get it changed. But they're not happy about it. And if there's a way they can make the change go through without admitting they did anything wrong, that will happen sometimes.
I want to chime in for a second. I'm on the peninsula in Palo Alto, and actually I've been working and I've been practiced for over 4 decades, so got a little bit of experience. But I ran into a situation with a client, and this is where the discussion of having good communications, just doing a simple change to the roof from a hip to a gable roof, went through the building department, and everything like you're saying, it's just taking forever and ever. We reached a point where he just said, I'm just going to do it without a permit. And I've done this before, where actually I had a building official, I had a practice in Menlo Park, where the building official called me on somebody who's doing work without a permit. So I had to correct that. So we had that discussion, and I said, and his contractor was all in for that. So that's the direction we're going to go. I said, I've done the drawings. I know they're right. So I'm not worried about that. So I just said, go for it. I'm here to support you. So I just wanted to see if anybody's been through that before, because you're right, time is money. I'm paying by the hour. Plus, I'm retired, so I'm not worried about it. But
Wes,
that's something that I think more and more people are gonna be doing.
Wes,
Yep.
I have a question. The contractor who said he would build without a permit, he's a licensed, California
Yes.
licensed general contractor. You know,
Yes.
does he know he could lose his license for that and be forced to give back all the money the client gave him?
I don't know. I haven't met the contractor yet. But he's taking that risk. To me, it's just it's such a small job. It's like I said, we're just taking the roof and changing it from a gable from a hip to a gable roof, just so you can gain more elevation.
Frankly, I would never work on a project where there's a stated intent to build without a permit.
I never said that. I've
Yeah.
had the conversation with the client. The client's making that decision. And I actually wrote him an email saying, you're taking that risk.
I have more clients telling me that they'd like to do things without permits. And I guess where I would draw the line in Wes's case is what the clients do is their choice, but I'm going to do drawings as if it was required for a permit that shows what
Right.
has to be done and is code compliant. And then I tell them, I says, if you can do this without a permit, I'm not here anymore. I'm not going to come out to your job site and look at it or anything like that. You're really on your own. And I generally tell them, I said, I tell them what the risks are about doing that and getting busted. And I've had clients do things without permits, and I've had clients get busted by it. It's kind of a pain.
I've got the drawings. Like I said, I feel totally fine with the documents I've got. If he needs to get the documents submitted, I'm willing to submit them. It's going to be after the fact. The city doesn't know that.
Is anybody else, it's a big ask, but if people can, add their video and get involved with the discussion, it would really be great. But if you're all working away and just listening, I guess that's okay too. Because we're not really coming up with any solutions or except for to go up the chain.
Yeah, in my case, I've got 3 projects that I'm retired. I am so fed up with bureaucrats and the bureaucracy involved. My projects are small now. And one of my strategies is to sick the owners on the planners and the building departments as well, because then the planners hear the personal story. I need this because I need an accessible bathroom. I need this because I've got to take care of my mother in the brand new ADU.
Mhm.
So that's worked for Oakland so far. But it's hard to have to do that. And I let my clients know that it's going to take a really long time to get approvals. And it's a wild card because all the planners are hiding. You can't get to them. You can't see them. They take 3 days to get back and tell you how much of a credit card charge they want for that permit fee. So I guess one of the things maybe the AIA can do is to try to get some standardized procedures and requirements for the Bay Area. Every jurisdiction has their own number of forms that they need to have printed on the document, and they're all at least 8 pages long. So by the time I get done doing a drawing set, 1/3 of the pages are bureaucratic BS, but it's covering everybody's ass because nobody can write small, simple forms. Even the Oakland planning for remodeling a room into a bathroom, they have to fill out a 15-page pre-planning application, that talks about civic art, and it talks about everything that could possibly come into a project. But this is supposed to be design review exempt. It shouldn't need a 15-page form, but it does. So yeah, I'm frustrated. I'm retiring. I'm done.
Yeah, it's out of hand.
Claudia.
Oh, I figured out how to do that. I think, you were suggesting that, or Matt was suggesting, someone was suggesting that the AIA get organized and put pressure on all of the municipalities. We have a good city council person in my district in Oakland, Shane Tao, and you know, they may be unaware that this is happening. I was thinking of seeing if she could apply pressure or go to the mayor, you know, to see if they can because they oversee the city employees. But I also like the idea of the AIA trying to do something. It just sounds like sort of a daunting task.
It is.
So this is really valuable, and I appreciate those of you who organized this for setting this up. You know, it begins with a good, any antidote that begins with a good diagnosis. So, you know, let's use this forum and future forums to think through what all of the issues are. You know, we've talked about the complexity of the code. We've talked about the responsiveness of the staff that's administering the code. We've talked about the need for educating junior staff. We've talked about the lack of kind of upfront guidance in terms of how to navigate the code. All those things. I think, you know, if we could come up with sort of a coherent complaint and then a position that is like, well, then what do we think what does the AIA think we should do about it? That could be posted on a page, say, you know, the AIA, so that we as individuals, when we go into a community and all, we want to write our letter, or if we're familiar with the zoning update in the community that's occurring and so forth, we can write a letter and we can, you know, cite or print that page, kind of more of a generic position paper. It's just a thought. I'll stop there. Oh, you know, one more thing, and that is that actually San Francisco, you know, every code is difficult. I'm sure people who've worked in San Francisco, and I've worked in San Francisco, you know, and it's problematic in some ways. But I gotta say, one thing that works really well is they have preliminary plan review, both what's behind the property line, and then on certain streets also what's in front of the property line, you know, what the public improvements need to be. And the checklist of the things that, you know, you should look for when you're designing a project is actually pretty good. It's, you know, it's uses simple language. It's thorough, but it's not overwhelming. And that's what you put together before you even submit the more detailed application, so you can course correct without having put too much effort into it up front.
One thing I found too, to Matt's point, is in Palo Alto, we are actually able to get their inspectors checklist. So if you kind of work backwards and know what they're looking for, that's going to avoid a lot of problems. I mean, the permit's just one side of it, but people forget that you got to deal with the inspectors. A lot of things can get tripped up and delayed because of that. But I found that with Palo Alto's checklist, from an inspection standpoint, I also dealt with that in a house in San Jose last year. If you can work backwards, that's going to alleviate a lot of problems, especially in residential.
Okay, I have a suggestion. The state passed a law a few years ago which said that when you make a submittal to the planning department, they have 30 days to determine whether or not your planning submittal is complete. And the intent of that law, as I understand it, was to accelerate the process a bit, because it was recognized that the bureaucratic process was taking a long time and was undesirable and not in the public good. So maybe my suggestion would be is to extend that rule, maybe at the state or local level, and specify that certain kinds of reviews should take a certain amount of time and to come to a conclusion in that amount of time. So if it's a building plan check, 4 weeks, or if it's a zoning administrator permit, once you have received the letter as to what's not complete and you have resubmitted, 30 days, whatever, something like that, to put the fire under their what, you know.
I was gonna make Thomas, I think you're ahead of me. You want to go?
No, I was just holding my hand up.
Oh. Well, I'll just briefly say that what you just said, Don, I think, Donald, that was the point I was going to make, is that, you know, I'm primarily doing residential work, and everybody's crying that we don't have enough housing, but when it takes you 3
Right.
or 6 months to get a simple room addition approved, it's slowing down everything, and it's not good for the community or the economy. Um, I think Oakland passed a streamlined plan check process for accessory dwelling units. I haven't actually done one in Oakland since that changed, but in Milpitas, they're just, you know, dragging their feet and making it really, really difficult to get this project passed. So that's, again, I'm just complaining and complaining, so.
Well, you know, I'm wondering who's going to take up the torch because we're all saying we want it done. But I am thinking in the back of my head, and just because Oakland, I mean, they're all hard. In Petaluma, I had somebody ask me to make sure that my egress window was egress. And it's like, if the company says it's egress, it's egress. You know, it's that simple. If you write egress, then the window company is required. And I also check it to make sure that anyway, it was just, I've never gotten this is the same planner that made me draw wiring diagrams for the electrical. But I've been thinking of going myself because I couldn't really get anybody to go from the Kirsten's group, the beer group, to Libby Schaff or somebody to talk to them about the problems with the Oakland planning. But you know, it would have been much stronger had I been able to get a group of architects. But I think everybody is afraid of doing this because they're all afraid, how will this affect me? Maybe my plans will take even longer to get done.
I will speak up now.
What?
I have a really good relationship with Bill Gilchrist, who's the director of planning and building in Oakland. And if we wanted to set up a meeting with a number of us to meet with him, I mean, it's not really Libby. Libby by law only, she administers the city. It's the city manager's office that runs the departments.
Well,
So, I mean, yes, Libby can say things, but ultimately she doesn't have that much control over individual departments. But I'd be happy to I'm offering to set up a meeting with Bill Gilchrist.
well, I would like to, as far as that, just because I would like to join that meeting, but I think we all should meet ahead of time and you know, make the points. I mean, my point is that the planners really don't understand.
And I would volunteer to participate in that meeting as well.
So Donald, do you know?
And I'd like to too. And it would be nice as a takeaway from this meeting to have a list of, and maybe it's everybody on this meeting, if you want to continue to have conversations about this, as might be facilitated by our chapter, which I think would be good use of chapter resources. You know, let's figure out a way where we can stay in touch.
Yeah, I mean, we can so what is the way? I mean, can you work with Donald about this? And Donald, can you direct them how to get this list?
Well, I took a screenshot of names, and
Okay.
then Mike Wilson is I think he's still the
Okay.
director for our chapter. This is going to be to really move things forward. You know, any volunteer organizations, like, how do you get anything done, right?
Well,
we're gonna have to rely on Mike to help move this ball forward, honestly.
Well, I don't even think you need that many architects. I mean, the more the merrier, but I think we pretty much talked about, I have my issues with people not knowing what they're talking about. Because and other people have issues with time, but we should just make a list And then each person can talk about it and see. But anyway, this is for later, but maybe that's Donald.
I think in order to have the most efficient outcome, rather than just have a bull session with the planning director where everybody is just airing their grievances and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's what they get all the time. I think there should be a little bit of work done beforehand to come up with a list of recommended changes that people would like to see. That way you could give that list to the planning person and explain it to them. And then also copy everybody else on the council and the mayor at the same time and say, you talked to the planning director and you made these recommendations.
Right. I mean, I made a recommendation to Angelina Pinos, I think is her last name. And I said, how come your short sheet doesn't include that DS1, you can't, you know, it would be a bullet head, keep 50%. And the other bullet head is total project cannot be more than 99%. That means the ADU plus any addition. I mean, I never got that information. And she wrote back saying, well, the planning director said that that would be a change in our planning code, at which case I just moved on. But that was my thing. But if other people have other things, is there another hand? I agree with you, but that's what we would meet about and figure it out. I agree. Suggestions.
I mean, my experience in general, and this is not more griping, but is that the planning and building process in Oakland was manageable. It was actually one of the better ones I've experienced. But once COVID came in, it's just absolutely made things, you know, literally 10 times longer. And I don't know that Bill can really, I don't know how we can get that streamlined, because it's just, I think a lot of staff are using it as an excuse, and a lot of them aren't in the office, so that's a problem. And obviously nothing's happening in person. I don't know whether that's going to change anytime soon, probably not. And again, not to just be griping, but I do think that COVID has just made it so much more difficult. And the city, you know, at first we thought COVID wasn't going to last very long. So the protocols put in place kind of weren't that well thought out. And, you know,
Yeah,
now
but
we're looking at,
if people can go back to school, I think government employees or people working in offices should be, you know, there should be stipulations. If you want to do this job, go get a COVID shot and wear a mask. You know, it's not, the whole system is falling down right now. And it's, you know, they're not getting our plans. At least Berkeley you can go into now, which is, it's really reassuring to go in and make sure they actually have your plans and you pay for them. And at least, you know, at that point, and they give you a card saying you should have your plan back by now. And it's like, you don't know what you're doing in other places. So, I mean, anyway, that might be one of the suggestions, go back. Or, you know, but anyway, anybody else?
I agree with you, Deborah. I agree with you. I'm extremely frustrated by not being able to get any human interaction in Oakland. And I'm working on projects in Berkeley, San Francisco, and Napa, where I receive much better responsiveness, where you can go in person. And
Wait, who is this?
This is Rebecca Friedberg.
Oh, hi, Rebecca. Okay.
Hi, Deborah. Yeah, I feel like Oakland is way behind the other jurisdictions in terms of their getting back to normal and their responsiveness and their accountability to both us as architects and the citizenry, the taxpayers, the owners, the building owners. I'm really seeing a drastic difference between the responsiveness of Oakland and the other jurisdictions I have projects in.
Yeah, I also think.
And there's no way to, I mean, it's just, I feel like I send emails and they go into a black hole.
Yep.
So. that is, I'm kind
They
of.
say we'll get back to you in 8 weeks.
Oh, but they don't. I have projects that I got an auto response that we'd receive a response within a certain number of days or on a certain day. And it's been a month since that day has come and gone. But I do think William, what's his name? William Gilchrist
Gilchrist.
has been,
Bill
has been
Gilchrist.
yeah, he's been responsive. I know he's been at other AIA events and I think he cares, but beyond that, I don't know. Like, I don't know even who to reach out to try to put pressure on the plan check department to.
I told you, I reached out, I gotta get her name again, but do you,
I can share some somewhat, I won't call it confidential, but just generally an observation about Bill, which is that he's great to talk to and he's very personable and he makes promises and he doesn't keep them. He does not follow through.
He also probably only has so much power, but who knows? Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not making excuses for him.
so the person that I reached out to that at least got on it, I'm looking for it now. Hold
I mean,
on.
I've reached out to Aubrey. Aubrey isn't
Forget
responsible.
about Aubrey. You know, I know he's beloved, but he was the one that said my project is DS1. And he wasn't the one that didn't tell me I needed to keep 50% of the exterior wall, or that my total project had to be more, couldn't be more. And it's not 100%, it's 99% of the existing if you're doing DS1. And, you know, come on, they should get that right. I don't think that's a lot to ask, but
I just found a flow chart on the City of Oakland's building department website that has, you know, it's like a flow chart of.
it's Angela Robinson Pino. I'll write her name.
Okay.
Okay. But
Can you share that flow chart?
Yeah, I just put the link in the chat.
Well, can we see it up on the screen?
Oh, you want,
Share screen?
I'm happy to share my screen if I'm allowed to do that. Share screen.
Yes.
Sure. Okay. Here.
I think it's going to be more complexity than you think, Tom.
No, it's actually like, you know, it goes here. I'm sharing the screen now. Can you see it?
Yeah.
You know, you've got Bill at the top and then it's split between planning, building and admin. And then on the left, we've got engineering plan check. So the first person's name you see is Elaine Placido, and I have actually had good results.
Elaine is great.
Yeah, I've had good
Elaine's very
results
helpful.
working with him. So maybe that's the person to reach out to next.
Well, he
And
works
then-
for Tim. And Tim is not so easy.
But then you've got all your, I mean, as you can see on the, here, I can make it a little bigger maybe.
well, this A Robinson person that I just sent to everybody, she does, and she was the one that I said you should change your sheet. And she doesn't know very much, but she will get it, you know, she will talk and say, she will expedite and she will call you back or email you back quickly, which I thought was pretty good.
Well, that's kind of what we all get paid for, is knowing who's helpful and who's not helpful.
Well, you know, the thing that I don't really, I think there's a perception that architects make so much money and they're there to make, they don't respect the planners and, well, they deserve not to be respected with some of the stuff they pull, but, sorry. But I'd love to name names because I talked to another architect who also had a big issue with the same person I had a big issue with. But anyhow.
I mean, I think we really want to find solutions and find those
Right.
people who are.
Can we unshare the screen now?
Yes, certainly. How do I do that?
I can't believe you knew how to show. Oh, I see. Share screen.
Yep, stop share.
Okay, so yeah, those charts are useful. That's what the other guy in the beer group said. He just looked who on the chart, who was a supervisor at the top of the planners. So the planner we were having trouble with had people on top of her. And he let her know that she would, I guess he wrote an email to her and the person on top. But it's, I spoke with somebody at the AIA about this, another architect and I were talking about it, and she said, that's horrible. It's horrible that these, anyway, I want to hear from other people. If anybody else is talking, or maybe there's just, maybe we have about a half hour. Go on, Donald.
It occurs to me that I actually did have a good experience with the city of Oakland recently. I'm working on a project where there's some code issues that you really need to get them figured out beforehand. And so I found out who the supervising plan check engineer was, and I'm just trying to find that email, and so I don't remember. I'm sorry?
Elaine Placido.
That's correct. That's who it was. And I wrote him.
He's sharp.
Yeah, well,
Can you put that in the chat?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
so but anyway, to kind of make a long story short, the used to be that you could go into the Oakland Building Department in the early stages of a project and the fire department, sit down with the plan and talk over with them, whatever issues you have with exiting or fire protection or whatever it is. And of course, you can't do that now, but they have set up what they call the engineer of the day with a special email address. And so what I found is that I put together a drawing that addresses a particular code question, and I describe it, and it's narratively done. I email that to them and with the question, and I get an answer back in less than a day. So there's, I think they've kind of revised a little bit there. Somebody sent it to me. I don't know if it was you, Deborah, or something that the city of Oakland has done to revise their web portal and how you access them. But at least in this case, it seemed to work okay.
Yeah, well, with planning, I mean, I find that the Oakland Building Department is pretty easygoing. That's what I found. I mean, I've gotten my plans approved.
Yeah, even though Kenny left.
Oh, I didn't know he left, but it's still like, I've gotten my plans approved, and they're fine. I mean, they're better than other cities and counties, but the fact that I went through 2, planners and nobody cited my project for what was wrong with it and just let me move on. I mean, to me, but anyway, I've said that 1,000 times, but I'm wondering if should we right now, because I don't want to waste anybody's time, should we just start to work on start a half-hour work session, and then we'll be, we don't have to follow through. I mean, and then that's not the word. We don't have to find a meeting time again. We could just use this meeting time, and anybody who's interested in staying now can work on what we try to present with Oakland.
I'm really interested in participating, but I have to sign off because I have to be somewhere else at 1:30, so I can't.
Well, it's 1. That's what I'm saying. Now to 1:30. That's all I have too.
Yeah, no, I have to sign off at 1.
Oh, well, we could write up what we're saying and you could go on.
I have a suggestion. Anyone who wants to be part of a follow-up conversation with the others in this group about the things we've been talking about, could you put your name in the chat, in the chat list, and then I'll work with whatever and create a mailing list of people. I think some of this stuff might evolve over time as people think about it and put their thoughts down on paper.
Okay, so you're not for starting right now. That's fine.
Whatever you want to do is fine. But I'm saying, I think all my point is, it would be great if we had, knew who was interested enough to keep working on it. And so those people need to raise their hand and let everybody know.
So is this guy from the city of Oakland, is Alan Placido, is he
Elaine,
Elaine? Is he in planning?
he's in building. He is the supervising plan check engineer.
So do you have anybody in planning that you recommend?
Not really.
Yeah, I found that I don't,
I mean, I have people
Angela
I
is-
like, but for certain things, but,
yeah.
and I actually like Aubrey. You know, you've had problems.
Well, you know, I know he's beloved and it does try to do what he can, but he was the one that told me to go ahead with my project for DS1. And I don't get without major things. He could have said you need to keep. I mean, that should be on the bullet point list that they have, that little 1-page thing. DS1, I mean, it's so simple to do that, but anyway. Anybody, well, so how many people would like to start kind of flushing out what we would say to the Oakland planner? And how many people want to continue this discussion about? It's kind of.
Well, I'm happy to participate in a further Zoom meeting about what we would say to Bill Gilchrist. I think that one of the big things we ought to say is, when are people coming back? And
Yeah.
I don't know how much control he has over that.
I think there may be an opportunity for very minor adjustments to how things are done in any one of these municipalities. I believe that this effort is it's going to require patience and persistence, really, to get there. So I agree that we should begin by taking any municipality and just using it as a kind of case study to understand what the issues are, so we can gather together what our complaints are and what our requests are, at least initially, and then use that as the basis for then at the chapter level, kind of coming up with some sort of position statement. My reservation in moving into this now is, I don't think this is the right format. I think that what we really need to be effective in order to prepare for this Oakland meeting is a kind of workshop format, where somebody is an assigned facilitator and is taking good notes.
That's not me.
I think that what we proposed might have a more than one category with respect to time. We might have some things which we think are things that need to be addressed quickly, and some things which are more long-term, and recognizing that some of the more difficult things will have to find a more long-term solution because the solution is more complicated.
Yeah, I'm wondering, am I the only one that had an issue with being told incorrect information from the beloved Aubrey? And on up, there was another woman, Karen, that they finally got to her. And I can give you, and she just talked about my roof direction and never said you're not keeping 50% of the exterior building. And your project has too many square feet to be DS1. I guess
It might be with the person, but honestly, it's also with the complexity of the code. And it's precisely because people get criticized for giving incorrect information that information flows slowly.
Well,
That
I would
people are
never-
afraid to say because they fuck up sometimes.
Yeah, but I don't think, I sent this to Aubrey and I know he does his best more than once. I said, so this is okay. It wasn't just like, is this okay? I sent it back and forth to him. Like, so this meets all the requirements for DS1. And then it went down the line and a month later, Karen, somebody looked at it and she didn't notice it. So it's not, I just feel like the education of the planning people is not good. And I think it was Linda Randolph said that they fired everybody in Oakland and then started with a whole new staff. And I don't know if this is true.
I don't think so. At least I know a lot of people who are still there.
Oh, well.
You know, there's a difference between administering a code where it's constantly a puzzle, and you're uncovering the need to look at yet another section of the code that is rather obscure but happens to pertain,
I don't
versus
think
versus
yeah.
a code where the factors are where there's a good checklist.
Right, and I think
and
these are good checklist things. These
These
are
are good
not
checklist
obscure.
things. Okay.
Right, but I
When-
was told when I suggested that then it wouldn't meet code. I mean, it isn't their code, but it seems to be what they were evaluating. So
I wonder-
I don't know where that ends.
Well, so is that a checklist thing or not? I mean, it
Exterior
seems to, but you're not, but
No,
it's not,
it
it's not,
is.
it is, okay.
I think it is. I never got the answer. And I just, I never got the answer. So, Donald,
Yeah, I wonder if there's experience here amongst us that points to the idea that bureaucrats in planning or building are sometimes behaving in an arbitrary way. I can give an example. I have a project in Richmond that required, it's actually in Contra Costa County, North Richmond, required a land use permit, which is a planning process. It's a more involved planning process. And so like all planning process, you end up with some conditions of approval. And what they're doing now is they are, among the conditions of approval is a requirement that you pay into kind of a fund for the local community to help offset some future facility that generates renewable energy. I think that's what it was. But the amount, which was $100,000, was set by the planning department. I mean, they just said, well, in the beginning, when we knew that something like that might come along, we said, well, what's it going to be? And they said, well, 75,000 probably. And it ended up being, now that to me, it's kind of it's a little bit of a shakedown. You want to get your approval, you're going to devote some funds into some of our community groups. Maybe that's an unusual experience, but to me, the amount is not written down in any code. It's not written down in any ordinance. It's just a negotiated thing. They'll ask you for what they think they can get.
I had that happen in Kensington. I did an ADU many years ago in an existing building, in an existing space, and the owner got assessed $15,000 for it.
50?
What?
50?
No, 15,000, which is a lot when you're he wouldn't have done it. And that was voted on, not by the planners. That kind of stuff is voted on by the as far as I know, it's not a planning department decision.
City
It's
council.
City council, right? And Goya's office, the who's ever on the city council members decided that, and they voted on it. And now they're not allowed to do that anymore because of the new accessory building stuff put out by the state. But so, I tried to fight it. I went to bat for the owner, but like you can't do anything. But it seems like Public Works to me is just like this cowboy out there, and they don't work with the planning department, and they don't know what's going, like planning and Public Works for these small projects, they don't work together. They don't know what each person is doing. So unless you ask the Public Works department, what are the impact fees? You don't know. And unless you did a project like that, nobody knows to ask that. Because I've asked it in other communities and they said, there's no big deal about impact fees. Are you kidding me? Who charged you 15,000? But then Albany used to charge a lot for impact fees, not 15,000, but at least half to 3/4 as much. But I think the state figured out this was happening and didn't want it to happen anymore. But it's anecdotal, but it's just another example of how you can be hit from any side with this stuff.
Well, I'd say today I've learned something. You talk about learning outcomes. I've learned that this is difficult in a lot of cities, that it's not getting any easier, that it's probably getting harder, that COVID is affecting it. And I don't know if I've gained too many solutions so far.
I think Deborah hit on one thing, is that there don't even seem to be any kind of centralized pools of information about even how to deal with one city. If you know, does the project cost affect whether you're required to do the private sewer lateral? Varies by dollar amount in different cities. What about the seismic gas shutoffs? What about school fees? What about whatever other kinds of assessments will come up for whatever little project you stumble in? I had one project during COVID where I took out 15 square feet from the project, so we didn't have of the addition, so we didn't have to try to figure out how to deal with the school district, because the school district office was closed and we would have had to pay a school district fee. So there's a lot of little traps that you stumble on, I think, unless you've done too many projects in any particular city. And every city has its own obscure collection of requirements. And that's one of the problems, is that every city has got its own collection of projects, of requirements that vary dramatically.
Well, I was interested with the beer group in trying to establish what the different, having a spreadsheet where people would feed in, but I didn't get anywhere with that. So, I mean, maybe you just talk to people that who have done projects in different situations and in different cities and counties.
Well, that's kind of what it comes down to. I mean, it's trial and error. It's, we're all frustrated. And the only way I've been able to, I mainly work in Oakland, and the only way I've been able to make any progress is to just keep asking and keep emailing and keep talking to Bill Gilchrist, and haven't really made any change. I've just learned more. And clients are furious, as you know.
I think when most of us got into this field, going back to our school days or something like that, I suspect that most of us had a fascination for buildings and architecture and their design and the history. I was talking with a couple other friends. One was a contractor and the other was an architect. And, there was general agreement, at least among the architects, that it's gotten to the point where the big value we bring to a project, maybe we can design, fine, but it's gotten to the point where the big value that we bring to the project is an ability to navigate the bureaucratic and regulatory environment to get something approved. And we spend a lot of our time doing that.
Yeah, I used to pride myself on being really good at that. Being essentially like an expediter. But since COVID, it has just exponentially I don't know. it's out of hand.
Okay, so Sydney with the chapter, I sent her a note, and she's collecting the chat window and she's going to get it to me. And I'll pull together the names of those of you who said you wanted to continue to follow and maybe try to turn this project into something beneficial for all of us. And I'll send out an email so that you all have access to each other's emails. And then we can start sharing some thoughts on what is the best way to go forward, what our
I'm reading
objective should be.
Sorry. I'm reading something in the chat from Michael Garabay. Are you still there? Because he wrote that this, in capitals, this discussion needs a lot more data before anything is put in front of any local jurisdiction. And I mean, we are not set up to have data. I mean, it's hard enough to get a group of people together to devote any time to anything besides dealing with the city and getting the projects done and dealing with the questions that come in from the contractors. And, you know, it's hard. So it is sort of more anecdotal, but
I would say for any given city, just a simple step-by-step, because the step-by-step has all changed. You know, it used to be you went to the planning department, you got your planning approval, you went to the building department, you got your building permit, and now it's every single step is just, it just needs explaining, and there's nothing out there guiding us.
well, I don't think it's for lack of the planners. I feel like a lot of planners do work hard. I don't know. I mean, there's some that maybe don't, but I feel like they're, you know, overstretched. And I don't know. I think it would be useful to know if Oakland's going to go back to in person, you know, start to populate their building department, planning department, permit center again. But I have had the issue constantly. Oakland planners constantly get this thing wrong. They say within 40 feet, you can't have a flat surface that's more, you know, elevation that's more than 40 feet wrong. But you can do that in the flats in certain zoning districts. And, you know, they say, no, you can't. And I've had that same discussion back and forth many times. And it's like, how hard is this to know this? If you're in the flats, in the zoning districts, residential zoning districts where their lots are thin, you can have more than 40 feet.
In my emails with Elaine, Tom, his last name, Placido, yeah. He mentioned that they were intending to be back and occupying their offices in a normal way on September 1st. But that's their goal.
That's before Delta.
I would take it with a grain of salt. Delta seems to be peaking in California right now, so it may, but yeah, it's he probably doesn't, probably not under his control. It's somebody way up there who decides it.
It's a city manager, probably.
Yeah, by the way, Delta's much worth right now in Hawaii. I mean, it's much worth in other states than it is in ours. But that's besides the point. I don't know if it's peaking. Could be.
The California Department of Health, I think it is, on their website has like a daily chart that shows deaths and infections in California. And deaths are extremely low, and the infections peaked a few days ago, and now they're sharply down.
Great. Great. Well, does anybody have any last comments? Because people seem to be taking off or.
I appreciate Deborah and Donald, your leadership on this, getting us to this point. I think this is a good beginning. I look forward to figuring, I think we need to sort out what the next steps are exactly. I encourage us to be smart about how we're going to approach it. I do think that the format of the meetings are really important. And part of that is not just to have somebody taking notes, but also to organize it. Like Donald mentioned, near term versus long term asks, requests that we'd be making, kind of separating that out as we talk about things. And I also think follow through is going to be important on this. This is not going to get sorted out in just a couple meetings. This is the kind of thing that really deserves to be a kind of committee within the chapter, honestly. That's my own perspective.
Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks, Donald.